Welcome back to Mark Holowitz Vlog again, everyone. Thanks again for joining. And today it's another great day for some storytelling. And I can't help but share a story with you guys because I truly believe every incident, every experience, everything that we find through our lives and get to interact with is a piece of that puzzle that creates who we are. And me being such a car person, I've had lots of different, very much impactful events in my life, both good and both bad, that have culminated to create who I am. And I know we've all been down there. We've all done things and experienced certain things that have made us who we are or had a big impact on some of the choices we've made in life. So that's why the storytelling exists. And I want to share another story with you guys. And clearly, it's about a car brand specifically. I had my first experience with this particular brand, and it was one because, naturally aspirated vehicles were always the thing. I mean, I always love loud, noisy, free-flowing exhaust systems from Lamborghini and such. But my first experience with a truly hardcore turbo system, obviously slightly reduced, was what I found when we made our trip to Las Vegas. A few years back, we grabbed the X5, the X5 diesel. Myself, Greta, the 4 kids jumped in the diesel, sucking gas, hauling ass down to Las Vegas, Nevada. It took probably 20 hours to get down there. And it was just like, darted, it was great. Lots of music, lots of laughs along the way. And then we finally show up in Las Vegas, to which we experienced a lot of great things. Of course, it wasn't just about the cars. It really was about, doing some shopping. We hit the outlet malls way down on the one end of town by the airport. Then we went down, of course, to the 2 different racetracks, one by the airport, and then the other one, of course, on the other end of town, on the north side of town. And we always, get around, see lots of shows. And of course, with that, there's always something to see or do, spend a little gambling money, and just kind of got around there, walked the strip, and just do what we do on Vegas. We also checked out the Hoover Dam, which is a must-see if you've never been. Maybe take a chopper ride over the Grand Canyon. There's lots of things to see and do. They all cost you an arm and a leg, but they're typically worth doing for the most part. So we did a lot of that stuff. And then, we had a little bit of break in the moment. I had about a day free because it's not your 3-day specials flying and fly out like you typically get when you're buying a package arrangement. But instead, we drove down to Vegas. So I think we spent about 2 weeks in combination between Las Vegas and Los Angeles, and we kind of spent some time in both. So we had about a week in Vegas, and with all that shopping and show watching, it was great, but we had some time. And so we went up to the Henderson area, up to the Las Vegas dealership, and I always love sniffing around there. As you know, I had a Lamborghini myself. I recently sold it, and I've always loved the brand. They make loud, great noises with that free-flowing open exhaust system. But when I was down there looking around, I was out shopping around on the lot there. They actually had a bunch of slightly used Lamborghinis, Huracans, and there was a couple of Aventadors. They actually had that Golden Knights Aventador in the showroom. It was a matte black, apparently made the news. And without saying too many names, but there was a famous hockey player playing for the Golden Knights that actually had it, or I guess you could say owned it for a bit. And yeah, I mean, so that car was in the showroom, and I remember gawking at it because it looked spectacular. I mean, any Aventador looks spectacular. So we were looking around, and, I was just shopping for some of the cars, just kind of more kicking tires, proverbially speaking, of course. And then outside just on the front patio section, if you've ever been there, you know that there's this section. They've got the small little outlet shop, and then they've got the bigger section that's another dealer section, of course, and there's a driveway in between, service bays. But out in front of that smaller section of the dealership for Lamborghini, there's a little patio, and they usually park, 3 or 4 cars out there. And there was this beautiful gray McLaren 650S. Now, it wasn't your traditional Spider, the convertible that you normally see, with the roof that comes off. That's typically what you find in probably 95% of the 650s out there. But they actually had this beautiful charcoal gray 650S, but it was the coupe. The coupe means it's a little bit lighter. Even though the whole chassis is carbon fiber, doesn't need a lot of reinforcing, the fact of the matter is the coupe is a little bit lighter, same power, so the car is incrementally quicker than the Roadster. So anyway, I'm looking at this car. We pull up in the X5, Greta, the kids are sitting in the X5 in the shade, enjoying the weather, just looking around, kind of off in the peripheral. And I go take a look at it. I'm just gawking at this McLaren 650. And, I've seen them in the magazines and the shows and everything, but I've never really had a good close look at it. And I'm looking this thing over, and, I'm looking at the front end, and it's got this massive carbon ceramic brakes on the front. And the headlights are awesome. I actually coincidentally love the headlights on the 650 better than the 720 that came after. The 720 is technologically a better car, faster. But the 650 to me had a better front end. It harkened a lot more like the P1. If you guys are McLaren fans, and that car had a big impact on me. And I had watched videos with Jeremy Clarkson, of course. A lot of you guys know, I've talked about that gentleman many times in a lot of my videos, and he himself has had a big impact. Why do you think I'm driving the F-Type? That's why I'm also driving the E60 M5. And a lot of the cars he seems to take favor on, I seem to kind of follow. Not to be a follower, so to speak, but, I always kind of love his personality, and he has a great way of sort of swaying you and convincing you that that's the car that you need. So, but either way, here I am looking around at Lambos, but then I see this great charcoal gray 650S McLaren, and I'm looking it up, and I'm walking around, and I'm scoping this thing out, and I'm thinking, geez, this is one amazing looking car. It looks way better in person than it does even honestly, I think a lot of McLarens you can say that for. I think they look a lot better in person than they do in magazines. I think some of the contours don't really pop out on you in pictures, whereas in person they look spectacular. So I'm looking this car over, and out comes a gentleman. And I'll just say, I'm not going to throw his last name in there. I'll say he's a general manager at Lamborghini there. His name's Rod. Absolutely amazing guy. If you're ever thinking about buying a car, maybe check that out. I've personally had some mixed responses in other parts of Canada when shopping for Lamborghinis. You get some great salespeople and others that I've thought were too much of a snob. And honestly, we were nobodies. We were from Canada. I was looking around. Rod, clearly, he just gave us lots of his time, spent a lot of time with me looking at this car. He comes up and asks me, hey, what are your thoughts? You liking the car? What are you thinking about this? And then he literally opened up a conversation. It became more of like, not about trying to pitch a car on you, but rather more of, historical, talking about, the background of McLaren, and McLarens have, such a racing heritage. And then he drew a parallel because he himself has a racing background. And then he drew that parallel and said, you know what? This McLaren is faster than anything in the showroom back there. And I quote verbatim, he said, they had Aventadors and Huracans, and that 650, he said, is quicker than anything there. And I would say that's probably pretty damn close. The 650 McLaren is a beast with 3.8 liters and a twin turbo V8, just under 650 horse, of course. Dual clutch gearbox, rear wheel drive, lots of aero, but it's all carbon fiber, and it's such a lightweight beast. So I knew all the specifications were there, and Rod and I are chatting back and forth, and became more of like, hey, old friends reuniting, although that's the first time I've ever met him. Absolutely superb individual. And then we were out there gassing on for probably half an hour. And then at one point he says to me, hey, you know what? If you got a few minutes, do you want to go for a drive? So I looked at my wrist, and I didn't even have a watch on my wrist. I rarely wear watches. And I said, sure, let's do this. And so he goes and grabs the keys, flips the door open. And that was my first impact. My first real close look at a McLaren. Again, I've seen them from a distance. As that door flipped up, kind of did that forward flip, I'm looking inside, and I'm like, oh, I just love, it had the carbon along the door sills. And one thing you'll notice, if you've never been in McLarens before, the first thing that I noticed was, as I looked inside, it wasn't where you have a narrow sill like most cars, typical cars you get in a BMW or an Audi, and you got a sill that's about yay wide, a little bit of seat space, and you're in. Like, it's nothing to flop yourself into the seat. But in the McLaren, the roof height was very low because it was the coupe. It was low, and there was none of that leeway like you get with the modern day 720s, where they actually do that cutout above where it's easier to get in. ergonomically, the 650 was more challenging. And for me, as I slid in there, I kind of like wrenched on my neck and I slid in there. But you have to slide in twice as far. You almost have to flip your ass inside, drop in, spin, flip your legs over, and do this real contortionist. I thought I was playing for Cirque du Soleil in Las Vegas, trying to get into that car because the seat's inset so far. And no, it's not that one with the center seat. That there's only certain McLarens that do that. We talk about the older F1, of course, with the 3 seats, one centered. But this one here, left-right seat, conventional seating arrangement, but it was just so far inset that the seats are quite centered inside the chassis of the car, and there's a really, really wide berth to fly over. And so that was the first impact, was noticing like I had to really shoehorn my way in there. And for me, well, it's not the best thing from a ergonomics and a daily driver perspective. I don't think you want to daily drive it, although some people would argue you can. You probably can, but unless you're really nimble and you're an Olympic athlete, you're probably going to struggle getting into that thing every single day. But once I got in, I felt like, oh, I'm in. Like, you felt like you're in a race bucket. That car, like, it hugged right around you. Remember, I had a Lamborghini Gallardo at the time, and that thing felt sturdy, rigid, and sporty. But this just take it to another level. It really did feel like 3 times the more exotic sports car. So here I am. Now I'm sitting in here, and I'm like, smell. There's a little bit of touch of leather in there. There's a lot of carbon fiber detail. I'm looking on the dash. The seats are Alcantara, which is essentially that fabric, that suede. I looked it over, and I felt like, yeah, man, I'm in a performance-oriented. This is a dedicated performance car that's meant for high-speed driving. Felt like a tool for performance. That's what, and as I looked around, I knew right away, like, this car is speaking to me. And that car is one that had a really, really big impact on me for McLarens. And I really, really wanted to buy a McLaren. At that time, I was sold. Rod didn't even have to say another word. Anyhow, so we get in. He closes the door. Rod jumps in the passenger side, flips up, jumps in, walking me through a few of the weird controls. I look over, and in a McLaren 650, you can probably appreciate some of the controls. Like, for example, heater controls are over on the door. Strange place for it. A lot of times the little display that shows the numbers and everything burn out. And then that's a nuance. And then, of course, the infotainment or the little screen in the middle is trash. But none of that seems to really even matter, honestly. Electronics and McLaren are clearly not well suited for each other, but that's not what you're in there for. Once we had turned the key on ignition and I hear the rumble of that engine behind me, I knew right away none of that other shit mattered. So here we are. And the thing is, what you'll notice with McLarens, they have the toggle shifters. And you've probably heard this a bunch of times on the net. But one thing I noticed, and Rod was quick to fill me in on, is you can literally shift up or down with one hand. So if you pull up, for example, your right hand, typical car on the right-hand side of the steering wheel, pull backwards, that's shift up. Pull it again, shift up again, and again, and again. However, you can flip your fingers and push that lever, and that goes actually the other way, downshifts. And why is that? Because that thing's on a rocker. So as you activate one end, the other end moves the opposite way. So if you were to pull on the left lever, it pushes the right lever in. It's on a rocker. It's a really weird, convoluted piece, but it was very interesting. And again, another one of those little nuances that impacted me in another way. So as we set off and we're driving, heating the car up, I heard a little story about, and I can't say the person's name, I'd probably get myself in some heat over that, but there was a professional hockey player that came down there to look at some Lamborghinis. He had done really well in his career, and he was looking at splurging, and the story goes that he came down there, test drove 3 or 4 different cars, and almost in the words of, Rod, this individual, this hockey player, professional NHL hockey player, was the first person that they had ever seen get airborne crossing over that. As you merge onto the on-ramp, there's a bit of a hump there that actually got one of those cars airborne, just due to, getting a little frivolous on the ramp there. So anyway, very interesting story. So here we're setting off, and I noticed, as you would expect, a high-strung, high-performance car like that, you hear the gearbox is a little clunky, a little whiny, and you hear the engine idling behind you. It's a little bit loud, but you can hear it behind you. There's that little inherent vibration, and all the sensations are coming. And we're rolling down the road, and Rod then basically says, okay, here's an on-ramp. Let's just kind of give it some gusto. So we were in comfort mode. So it's pretty softened up in terms of what it'll allow. It really tightens up the traction control, and it really doesn't let anything get too loose on you. So I accelerated down the on-ramp, and I'm pulling gears first, second, third. But honestly, I was short shifting, and I was only maybe revving up to about 30, 35, 4,000, 4,000, 4,000, then shifting, 4,000, shifting. And anybody who's driven these cars know that they don't drive like a normal turbo car where you get all this fat torque curve and you don't need to rev them to get the performance. A McLaren does have that power band, and it does need the revs to get the performance. And so Rod's like, okay, get on it. Let's do this. Let's see this. So then I downshift, and now I'm at a higher rev. Then I pull on it, and it was lightning. All I'm looking at is a blur. And I couldn't believe how fast that thing, and I looked down at the speedo. I'm thinking, oh, alrighty then. Let's just slow that down. So we cruise on down, and we kind of gear down, and then we make our way, and driving down the freeway a ways and just talking shop again about the car and some of the features. And then as we turn off the off ramp again, we turn around to cycle back to go back down to the dealership. So here I am, we're turning, and now we're sitting situated, waiting with a red light to make a left-hand turn to go down the on-ramp back onto the highway. So here we are, and there's a Ford F-150 parked in front of us. Light turns green. Rod's like, here, let's try something a little different. Switch it up to sport mode, so it gives it a little extra leeway before traction control sets in. So we tweak that. The F-150 goes zooming off. We're like, hang on for a second, hang on. So there's no other cars coming. All of a sudden, I get on it, hit it. We're talking 45, 48 degrees Celsius. It's hot, man. I mean, it's probably 100, 105 degrees Fahrenheit-ish. And we're still breaking loose. First gear, breaking loose. The car's kind of getting loose on me. Second gear, still getting loose. Third gear, it's still kind of loose, and I'm feathering throttle. Like, I'm not even fully into it. I'm probably 2/3, 3/4 throttle, and this car is getting loose on me, and I'm having to actually back off and throttle it. You know, most of the cars I come from, you could put your foot to the floor and keep it in a straight line, you're good. These McLarens are that quick, and I was literally blown away by that performance. In hot weather like that, and the tires still fail to grip. So here we are, we're accelerating, we're, pulling third gear, and things are like just turning into a blur. Basically let up, just had that quick little feel, that little jump, and then we get back onto the freeway. Now we're back down to, Prius speeds, if you will. So then we cruise along, we get back to the dealership, jump out of the car. My knees are shaking. They're literally shaking. I'm like vibrating because that was such a rush. That car experience was incredible to me. And I knew right away, I was, said to Rod, I'm going to have to check in on the whole importation thing because I like this car. It was great. And I think the car in question only had, I think it was only 3,000 or 4,000 original miles. So it was super low. Like it was a locally owned, well-maintained, very few Ks on it, super clean car. I was ready to pull a trigger. And then, I talked to Rod. I said, I'll take your card. We'll go talk about it. We'll see what it takes to make this transaction. Talked to the wife. We said, and then we went home and, started looking at the markets. And what I wanted to do ultimately was to sell the Gallardo. And I tried selling the Gallardo. And then, in doing so, I was hoping to make a quick sale so that I could maybe look at that car. Because even though it was, US dollars are so much stronger than the Canadian dollars, even with the exchange, that car was priced in such a way that it would still be cheaper. Like us in Canada here, we get screwed on everything. Cell phone bills at $125 a month. Buying a new car, like it's just ridiculous. I remember being down in Los Angeles there, down a Rodeo Drive, and there was a Porsche dealer years ago. And there was this family, and they were buying their kid who was just graduating high school. They were buying him a brand new 911 Carrera. Go figure, I could only be so lucky. But they were buying this kid a new Carrera, and they were talking to the salesperson about it. And it was this was years ago. It was a 993, if you guys remember that. That was the last of the air-cooled cars, and probably the best of the air-cooled cars. And they were negotiating a price on it, and I just overheard. And at that time, that was only I think it was like $70,000 or $75,000 for that car brand new. And I know that same car in Canada, when I came home, I shopped, it was a Carrera 4, 993. Those prices were higher too. I think we're talking $120,000 in Canada versus 70. Like, it didn't even make sense. Even with the conversion, you're still saving money. So that's what I was thinking with the McLaren. I think, come home, sell the Lambo, and I was going to buy that McLaren. That was the first thing on my hit list. I wanted to try to sell it. We put the Lambo on the market, but unfortunately, it doesn't sell like hotcakes. Lamborghinis in Alberta don't sell all that quickly. I'll share you another story another day too about how that went, because I had several weird experiences with the Lamborghini, actually, let me tell you, trying to sell it. Actually buying it and selling it. I don't know what it is. Lamborghinis just bring out some of the strangest people that I've experienced, both on the buying and the selling side. I don't know. Anyhow, so I'll share that another day. But for the time being, I just want to share that story with you because the McLaren had such a big impact. And even eventually, I finally sold a Lambo, but it actually took me a few years to do that, if you can believe it. Took several years and a new clutch later and a bunch of maintenance later. And so I'm sad to say that McLaren went away. I stayed in touch a little bit with Rod, but of course, unfortunately, that car had come and gone. The ship had sailed. But the point is, then I started that love affair for McLaren. And then this year, after I sold the Lambo, I decided, maybe I'm going to start buying. I need the McLaren. So I started, actually, the car that was on my radar was not just now the 650. I wanted to buy a 720, and I started shopping all over town. And I'll share some of those stories with each and every one of you guys there coming up real soon. I want to talk about some of these. I have such great, juicy stories about all of this stuff. So I can't wait to share some of the stories about the Lambo and the McLaren and the Porsche and the Fiat and buying and selling and all of that shit, because there's a lot of fun stories. I just can't. This is my way to sort of catalog my life, if you will. I want to start cataloging my life through a vlog. Maybe you guys can take some of that with you. And remember, I think every one of these little moments in our time has an impact on us in some way. So if you guys have had a very impactful moment in your life at some point, whether you're flipping a car, buying a car, shopping, driving, maybe at a bad situation, maybe a fun one, I don't know. I'd love to hear it. Please drop a line, guys. I'd love to hear it. And as well, I'm going to comment that the channel is growing. We're only about 90 subs shy of making 3,000 subscribers on Mark Hollip's The Vlog. I can't even imagine. I look at the other channel, Exotic Car Play Place, and I'm at over 200,000 subscribers. I'm at probably 200, I would say about 210,000, 211,000 subscribers. I just can't wait for the day that I'm pushing 200, 500,000 on the vlog, because I really believe this is about being real. Exotic Car Play Place is about giving you all the information you need to go out there, armed, buying the right cars, avoid the wrong cars. But this channel is all about living the life. I just want to share the life experiences. So please, if you haven't already subscribed, I'd love if you can hit that subscribe button. It's really that simple. It's not going to cost you a dime. It's really just to show that your support of the channel, the support of what it means to live the life, live the dream. Remember, there's a lot of bad influences around us. Let's keep it above board. Let's enjoy those passions. Let's take advantage of those passions. So please drop a subscribe and a comment. I'd love to see you guys on the next one. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.